Hi everybody. Okay, looks like everyone's in and connecting. Great. So I'll just run through our intro slides. So welcome to the last session of the Social Value UK Members Exchange 2021. Thank you all for coming along and still coming along all the way through right till the last afternoon. This is the Social Value and Change Makers session. So this one is going to be a little bit different to the panel discussions you may have attended already this conference. This is going to be a bit more of a showcase of our speakers talking through their work rather than a traditional panel, but there will be opportunity for questions too as well. So I'll just let you know who's on this panel. So sadly, Jenny isn't able to make it anymore, but she has hosted a really good session this morning. So if you do want to hear from her, I recommend logging into the Hayes Summit over the next few days and watching that recording. You'll have up to a month to watch that. I'm David Thomas. I'm the Communications and Campaigns Manager here at Social Value UK, and I'll be facilitating this talk. But I'm also joined by Mayor Joanne Anderson, Mayor of Liverpool, Nigel Rose, Strategic Lead for Commissioning at MAC, Hannah Gibbs, the Coalition and Campaign Delivery Lead at the Better Business Act, Beth Pilgrim, co-founder and CEO at Supply Change, and Isabel, oh wow, I just butchered your name there, Isabel Parosram, CEO at Social Value UK. But before we kick off, I'll just run through some housekeeping that you probably heard a lot about already. So just please keep yourself on mute when others are speaking. Please feel free to use the chat to ask questions and introduce yourself. You should be able to see a live transcription of this session, and there should be one popping up in the chat sometime over the next few minutes. And just to let you know, the session is being recorded, so do feel free to put your camera off, though I believe it does only record the person who's speaking at the time. And you'll be able to watch this back on Hayes Summit, likely from tomorrow or Monday, and it'll be on there for over a month to watch back if you'd like to do that. So I'll stop sharing my screen now, and I'll pass you over to our first speaker, which is Mayor Joanne Anderson.
Hi everyone. Hope everyone's okay being indoors when the weather's actually lovely outside, which makes a bit of a change. Wasn't too detailed in the brief. I was told to talk about myself and how I got here, so I'll start at the beginning. I used to be really active in the trade union movement when I was in my early 20s, which is, very political structure, and I represented workers across the country at TUC Race Relations Committee and on national panels. After 2 or 3 years in that environment, I found it very stifling when it comes to equality, and being very passionate about delivering equality on behalf of communities. My working life and working profession has been as an equality and diversity consultant. So I set up the first Black social enterprise in Liverpool 20 years ago as a race consultancy, or an equal opportunities consultancy specialising in race. And from that was able to ensure that I had a good impact on communities. So I translated what communities wanted, give them a voice in terms of working with public sector agencies to affect policy. And never for the life of me could I understand why anyone would design a policy without consulting or engaging or co-designing with the people it affected. So after a 10-year stint in the Crown Prosecution Service as a civil servant, when the recession hit, I come back to Liverpool as a consultant and really got harassed to be a local councillor. Had no desire. Everyone just kind of pushed me into it for the area in which I live, which is not where I'm from, but people will have heard of Toxteth and Liverpool 8 in Liverpool. So it's got the highest rate of minority ethnic communities in Liverpool, gets slandered in the press, it's got a terrible reputation, it's actually really rich in community assets. Fantastic place to be, best place in Liverpool, but I have to be quiet about saying that. But really is, it's got so much from a community perspective, great community organisations, great history of being creative and artistic and working in a way with communities that regenerate communities. So lots going on. During that time, I'd done social value practitioner training. I was on the board of Furniture Resource Centre 20 years ago on Bulky Bob's. So Jeremy Nichols, one of the previous chief executives of Social Value UK, and a few other people were just figuring out social value measurements at that time. So I was there very much at the beginning, but missed out the next 20 years of social value measurements. So for me, measuring social value is really quite simplistic. You work out what you value and then you measure it. None of the complicated stuff that we get into. So I've always been comfortable with caring about what we value and then trying to find a way, you know, making sure that we do that. So fast forward 20 years and I'm a local councillor, and I was just about to get on with my life as well. I'd had, you know, I know lockdown's been really awful for lots of people, but actually I never stopped working during lockdown and was at the best position I'd ever been in my career. So I went and sabotaged it all by standing for the mayor of Liverpool. It could have all gone horribly wrong, but actually it worked out. But what I've appreciated now that I'm 50 years of age and I've got all that work experience of working with communities, making sure we have an impact in terms of equality and diversity and inclusion, and, you know, communicate and helping communities communicate with public sector agencies about their wants and needs. I actually feel that all my professional work experience has led me to this moment, really. And so as a political leader of the city, that's one half of my job. The other half of my job is to literally just lead the city, and where I add value is my experience around equality and diversity and social impact. So in my manifesto, what I campaigned on, I talked of having a triple lock to our decision making sure we have a good environmental impact, a good social impact, and that we made a good impact in terms of equality and inclusion. As I get in the council, all that stuff is measured, or at least the templates are in place for the reporting mechanisms, but I've spent the first 6 weeks pushing reports back and saying, you haven't identified the implications in terms of quality. You haven't understood what we mean by social value. You haven't got the best out of that contract in terms of social value. And, you know, in terms of environmental impact, actually, we're probably better at that than we are on social value and measuring equality and diversity inclusion. So if I'd done nothing and sat there and just pushed these reports back, that would make a massive impact. But what I've learned is, you know, we talk a lot about these things, we strategize, we think a lot, and, you know, there's guidance after guidance about what we can do. And when it comes to the practical ability, an organisation like ourselves, Liverpool City Council, not just the council, the combined authority within the region, I'm pretty sure probably the other councils in the region will really pour at actually drilling that down to a practical level. How can we make a difference as part of this contract, as part of that decision? How can we make a difference to people on the ground, and to never forget that? So I feel quite confident, you know, as I say, if I'd done nothing else and done that, it would make a difference, because I'm forcing directors to think about it, and forcing people to identify and understand ways in which they can have a better impact. But obviously I'm a bit more ambitious than that. So in terms of what's happened during COVID, and how it's highlighted the inequalities within our communities and the impact of them, there's a collective consciousness, more so than I've ever experienced working in this field, to really try and tackle inequality. And I think it's all interlinked, isn't it? Housing, health, education. You know, good mental health is about, you know, not having the strains of worrying about where food's coming from, worrying that you haven't got a home to live in, a roof over your head. They're all the issues that affect it. So it's really, you know, I'm delighted to have an opportunity to try and impact at a city level on really getting down to the detail and really ensuring that we regenerate our communities in a way that impacts on them positively, because it's led by them. So that's my strategy, really, empowering communities so they can address their own problems, looking at things like community land trusts so communities can own their own housing. I'm the regional for the Liverpool Combined Authority. I'm the education and employment skills lead. So what I will focus on there is marrying industry up with where they've got skills gaps to our communities that have got untapped talent. So we've got massive race of Somali lads unemployed, and there we are with a clean growth sector with not enough people to go into the jobs. So being in the driving seat and being able to affect that change, I'm really excited about. But it's week 6, so you'll have to come back and ask me year 2. I'll leave it there, David, if anyone wants to ask any questions.
Thanks, Joe. That was great. We've not had anything in the chat yet, but I will call on you if we do. But in the meantime, I'll pass to our next speaker, and that's Beth.
Hi, everyone. I'm Beth from Supply Change. I'm just going to share my screen with you, and then I'll start. So hi, it's really great to be with you all today. Supply Change is a social enterprise founded in 2018 by myself and my co-founders, Isha and Verena. And our mission is to create a world where goods and services are commissioned with social value and environmental value at their centre. And the way that we want to do this is by increasing the number of social enterprises in public and private sector supply chains. And today I kind of want to talk to you about our work in the context of systems change, which rings kind of most true for supply change and what we're trying to create. So systems change, the definition of it is the emergence of a new pattern of organisation or a system structure. And for supply change, that means changing the structure of public and private sector procurement in the UK and replacing it with a more inclusive, sustainable economy that will work for everybody. And as Joanne just touched on, I think the last 12 months, well, last 15 months, have made the need for this change more potent and more important than ever. It's widely acknowledged that the worst aspects of the pandemic have hit some harder than others, and it's brought to the surface these vast inequalities that exist in our societal systems. So now that we are beginning to emerge from the pandemic, we have to keep a focus on how we can recover in a way that benefits all of us, and think about how we can challenge those systems. And we've also seen the emergence of, I guess, a new, like Joe said, collective consciousness in our communities, the kind of popping up of mutual aid groups, people volunteering in their communities and being more active in how they create change. So if we as individuals are doing that, then it's clear that we need to expect that of businesses, both public and private sector as well. There are over 100,000 social enterprises in the UK, and these are businesses with a mission at their heart, from providing jobs and training to those furthest from the work market to protecting our environment through innovative and sustainable practices. They are often at the forefront of delivering this positive change that we really desperately need. And also throughout the pandemic, they have shown great resilience and flexibility to support communities while still delivering great services. And often this has been in collaboration with private businesses and the public sector, such as delivering PPE to social housing tenants or care packages to the NHS. So social procurement is happening, just sometimes outside of the normal procurement processes. So what if we changed the system so that more public and private services were delivered by social enterprises? From a community cafe that's helping isolated older people with their mental health to a cleaning company employing ex-offenders, the impact could be vast. And this approach makes common sense, but unfortunately it's not yet commonplace. And there's a number of factors that contribute to this. There's still a lack of visibility for social enterprises to access contracts with public and private sector businesses. Sometimes there can be misconceptions around social enterprise and what they're capable of delivering. And this means that there is still a low percentage of social enterprises in public and private sector supply chains. But there are some really positive changes happening in this area, and Supply Change really welcomes the new social value model that was introduced at the start of this year to kind of help open up central government contracts to the VCSE sector. But on the other hand, the recent headlines about government cronyism concerning COVID PPE contracts also show us that more needs to be done to dismantle current systems that benefit the wealthy and the powerful. And we need to ensure that transparent and social procurement becomes the norm. So how is supply change going about trying to change this system? Well, systems change is all about addressing the root causes of a problem and replacing them with new, better systems. So at Supply Change, we're trying to work with both buyers and social enterprise suppliers to remove some of those root barriers to social procurement and create that meaningful impact. So for buyers, we offer a range of services to make buying from social enterprises easier, kind of risk-free and more convenient. So our spend analysis services help identify areas of opportunity within existing spending to switch to social enterprise suppliers, to give buyers a benchmark to work from and to start making some quick and easy changes. Our policy and reporting support helps to embed social procurement in organisational targets and helps them to track their impact and increase that accountability for organisations. And then our virtual networking events connect buyers directly with social enterprises to sort of raise awareness and change those mindsets and misconceptions around social enterprises and create internal support and buy-in for social procurement. And finally, the Supply Change platform is a directory of pre-vetted social enterprises, which buyers can use to find suppliers that can deliver quality and a positive impact. And for suppliers, we're helping to increase their visibility to buyers through the platform and also our events, whilst also providing opportunities for peer support and learning across our network. We really believe in championing the great work they do and helping them to grow and thrive through the redirecting spending towards them and their impact. But as well as changing the UK procurement system, we are also committed to dismantling the kind of larger societal structures and systems that uphold it. We're a female-led social enterprise operating in an often male-dominated space of UK procurement. And we believe that that's a strength of ours and we can offer a fresh perspective on social procurement. But in the wake of the events last year and the murder of George Floyd, we're also committed to raising the voices of communities who face barriers to navigating the procurement and social enterprise sectors, which as a team of predominantly white and white-facing women, we have not had to face ourselves. Transparency and inclusivity are a real core value of Supply Change, and we want to help connect buyers to a wide range of social enterprises that we really feel reflects the best of the UK's diverse social enterprise ecosystem. It's just under 40% of our current social enterprises are female-led, and just under 20% are Black or minority ethnic-led. But we know there's a lot more to do. And we will continue to learn and try to make the social enterprise sector and procurement a more equitable place for everybody to create impact. So in terms of the change that we've created so far, we'll be 3 years old in August this year. Don't know where the time's gone, but in that time we have made some great progress. As of this year so far, we've redirected just under £250,000 towards social enterprises. And this spend has gone towards social enterprises creating social value across a wide range of issues like climate change, homelessness, the rehabilitation of ex-offenders, and support for those living with dementia. Through our events, we have supported over 700 social enterprise and buyers to connect with each other. And as you can see from the slide, we're working with organisations across local government, housing and construction to keep doing more. But I feel like we're only just getting started and we have really big plans for the future. So in the next 5 years, we are aiming to redirect 20 million of spending towards social enterprises. And we want to become the go-to place for social procurement support in the UK. But more importantly, we want to help build this new system, this new economic culture, where if you and your business want to spend money, you need to demonstrate a positive impact in the local community for the people and places who need it most. So I just want to finish by saying that the concept of social enterprise has often been referred to as a business where society profits. And I think it's really clear now more than ever that this is the kind of system and society that we need in order to support those who need it most and to build back a fairer world. So big businesses and the public sector alike have a responsibility to act. And social procurement has that potential to create a more inclusive and equitable society at often no additional cost to buyers. So now is the time to kind of get behind this systems change and get behind social enterprise and hopefully get behind supply change. So thank you very much for your time. And if you're interested in chatting more about social procurement, there's my details and that's our website. But I will stop sharing now.
Thanks so much, Beth. That was great. You've got a question here in the chat from Kath. Kath, would you like to read that out, or I can if you prefer?
Sorry, yeah, no, I don't mind. Thank you, though. Beth, it was really good to hear you about challenging procurement. Over the years, I've heard that, you know, the barriers are quoted so many times about, oh, it has to be open, it has to be under EU legislation, all of that, rather than saying this is what's best for our locality and area. But my question was about saying that we often see social enterprises not-for-profits in either service industries or around social care provision, and much less so in innovation and product development. Which means that social enterprises only react to requests and tenders rather than actually shape the market. And I just wondered, is this due to financial support and the risk involved with being more innovative and new technology production, or do you think there's other barriers?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, well, what I would say is I do think that there are social enterprises out there innovating, and I can think of a few in our membership who have kind of offered new products and new services to organizations. And maybe it might not be kind of innovation in terms of, I don't know, a new type of technology, but it might be something like looking at the way you manage your deliveries and your transport so that your carbon emissions are significantly reduced. And that actually is innovation, and that is affecting change. So I do think social enterprises are offering innovation. It might just not be viewed in the same way as other types out there. But in answer to your question about barriers, yes, I think definitely access to kind of finance, particularly access to finance to scale is definitely a barrier. You see lots of support for kind of early startup social enterprises, and then lots of support for very established social enterprises, but there's a bit of a missing middle to get social enterprises who maybe have won a few contracts, got them under their belt, and they're ready to take that next step. And that can often be a barrier to being able to offer those new goods and services. Hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you. So I'll pass you over to our next speaker, which is Nigel Rhodes.
Hi all. I'm going to put some slides on as well. I'm afraid they're rather boring, not as interesting as the best slides, but it'll save you from having to look at me during the time. So I'll put those on now, once I can find them. I'm not doing very well in finding them at the moment. Just give me a moment. Ah, got them. Okay, so I work for MAC, which is the Voluntary Sector Infrastructure Organisation for Manchester. But the reason I'm talking today is because I'm also a part of the steering group of the Greater Manchester Social Value Network. Ignore the bit that says conference on there. And I'm just going to do a little bit of an introduction to the work of the network. So we formed in 2015, and essentially what happened was I got together with a couple of other people that I knew were really interested in social value to set up the network. And at that time, there was quite a lot of work going on in Greater Manchester, really mostly focused around procurement on social value. And there are lots of people beginning to get interested in it. And what we felt we needed to do was bring people together to actually focus on not just the procurement side of it, but actually much more broader than that in terms of how social value works within organisations. And also bring people together who were most interested in it, bringing people together to discuss stuff, and recognising that though a good start had been made in Manchester, there was an awful long way, awful lot further to go. And really it's very explicitly, and I think the other speakers had already talked about this, is what we're interested in is social change. And we're interested in social value as being a vehicle or enabler of social change within Greater Manchester. And I suppose one of the ways that we think about it is that adopting a social value approach is the most efficient use of resources within an area, because it's a way of enabling the statutory, voluntary and private sector to work together and to each share and use the resources that they have and the experience and the expertise that they have all together. So the core purpose of Greater Manchester Social Value Network is to influence stakeholders, policy and strategy at the Greater Manchester level. In a broader sense, there are about 150,000 enterprises, charities, roughly working in Manchester. What if every one of those organisations was seeking in some way to enhance its social value and just improving bit by bit on the social value that it has? The level of difference that would have if people began to think in that way. And the job of the Social Value Network is to gently encourage that to happen. Bearing in mind we're a bunch of volunteers doing it in our spare time. At the moment we don't have any workers, but we incorporate it within the work that we do. So the steering group is made up of voluntary sector infrastructure organisations, a range of businesses, accountancy, engineering, retail, construction, a think tank, Claire's, who've done a lot of work in the social value arena. And you might have heard about the Preston model, and that is something that Claire's were involved in. Local authority, procurement, housing associations. We meet 6 weekly and look at a whole range of issues. But the best way of thinking about the steering group is that it is a series of those people that are passionate about changing what's happening around social value across Greater Manchester. They are kind of drivers, and we have some of the key people in social value across Greater Manchester within that steering group. What we are doing and what we have done, we collect information, evidence and examples. We do a regular newsletter. We have about over 250 people who have signed up to the network. And to be honest, we can have a lot more, but we don't have the time to do the promotion kind of work. There's so much interest in this. We do a lot of stuff which is just talking and supporting and helping people who are working in the kind of social value framework to connect with each other. We run very well attended conferences. We developed a training pack. We're hoping to do a video that it actually explains what social value is, because anyone who works in this area knows that you talk to a lot of people who may talk about social value but haven't really quite got what it is and what the power of it is. And so in a way what we're trying to do is flip the switch in people's minds from a kind of rather mechanistic way of thinking about social value to one that is really adopts the idea that it is a fundamental change in the way that you think about organisations. We also challenge some of the poor social value behaviour that goes on. And so, for instance, offsetting, where in some procurement, people are allowed to give money rather than actually demonstrate their social value, which is a very odd, I think most of us would agree, is a rather odd thing to do. And also challenge the idea that social value is about organisations giving free stuff or stuff on top, when it should be incorporated into the way they are, rather than something that they're just doing on the side because it's part of the contract. So one of the things that we did recently and we launched was a social value manifesto. And I think this neatly ties into some of the things that people have already talked about. One of the kind of, this is not the whole manifesto, it's a bit longer than this, but I've just picked out a few areas from it. We are very, one of our central things is around how the public, commercial and social sector work together for the common good around a whole range of issues. And we have done a guide to how businesses and the voluntary sector can work together in partnership. So what is the most effective way of voluntary sector organisations? When I say voluntary sector organisations, I'm actually talking about voluntary community and social enterprises, I should say. Very much the broad set of organisations. How do they actually work together most effectively? We're seeing a lot of ways of working together which are not the right way of doing it. There needs to be proper partnership, proper learning, proper benefit from both sides. And the commercial sector needs to have a business case for why it's working in this way. It shouldn't be doing it because it's doing it from a philanthropic basis. They should be doing it because that's the best way of running their business. Other things that we do are about supporting other brokerage networks across Manchester, across the whole of Greater Manchester. And so a number of the people that are involved in the network and in the steering group run other brokerage networks. And the brokerage networks take a whole range of forms. So some of them are about direct introduction, some of them about partnerships with, for instance, within Bolton or Wigan, where people who are interested in social value are working together. In terms of the social value at the heart of commissioning and procurement, what we're doing, one of the things that we're doing at the moment is writing a guide around how you build social value into specifications. And so we're seeing too many things where people are doing a specification and then putting the social value as the added bit, instead of building social value into the very fabric of what they're asking for. And so there are some good examples where people have done that. And so recently I did some work with Manchester around how to build social value into their home care contract. And there's so much opportunity to do that if you think about how to do services or anything that you do in a creative way. And certainly what we find most powerful is when we bring the private, the voluntary and the private VCSE sector and the public sector together to think creatively about how they can maximize social value. It is about that social side of it, which is the thing that really makes a difference. We're also influencing, of course, and some of our steering group members work for the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, and we work with Andy Burnham, Joe's equivalent in Greater Manchester, the Greater Manchester Mayor, about how they are thinking about economic development and how they are building in social value into that economic development model. And as one of our speakers shortly is going to talk about, we would very much like to see change in legislation around business, and so that anybody that is procuring in Manchester should only be procuring organisations that have community benefit built into the way that they behave and act. It seems a really strange idea, I think, to a lot of us that you could be giving money to an organisation that is actually causing social harm. And so we need just to be working with organisations that are doing social good. And so I think that's finally what I say, what I want to talk about. I'll stop sharing now. The social value network, there is so much we want to do. We don't have time to do nearly as much as we would like to do. We do have a training pack and we do have a website if you want to find out more about us. The training pack, I think many of you would find very useful. It's got some core exercises which help to explain what social value is quickly and accurately within that. Okay, and I will leave it there.
Thank you so much, Nigel. That was great. I'll pass you over to our next speaker, which is Hannah.
Thanks very much, David. And I'm also just going to share my screen if you give me 2 seconds. Okay, hopefully you can all see that now. So thank you very much. And it's great to follow on from these fantastic speakers. I feel like there's a ton of overlapping threads here that I'm looking forward to touching on. As David said, my name's Hannah. I'm a Coalition and Campaign Delivery Lead for the Better Business Act. And I'm going to introduce you to why we need the Better Business Act, what exactly it is, and what the campaign that I'm working on is doing to make the Better Business Act a reality. So bear with me, I'm going to use a bit of a sea analogy throughout this, but building on some of the things that both Beth and Joanne mentioned. In 2021, we're faced with some pretty rough seas laden with challenges that have been thrown into sharp relief by the COVID-19 pandemic. These kind of dual crises of the climate emergency and rising inequality are systemic and often overwhelming in scale, as both of them also touched on. But we believe that business presents a common thread between these issues, as we are all brought together in the workplace or the marketplace. And so business is also the most potent tool in human hands for either contributing to these crises or for delivering solutions and driving us towards shared prosperity. So as individual businesses across the UK have navigated these uncharted waters, we're seeing some incredible examples of leadership in creating businesses that are fit for the future, some of which Beth was touching on earlier. So businesses that are finding new mechanisms for understanding and responding to the needs of their stakeholders and the environment, while also delivering profit for their shareholders. In fact, as Beth also mentioned, businesses operating in this manner report great results, attracting better talent, and research shows they're often more profitable, and something, yes, that we were also hearing from Nigel. But if the UK economy is to meet the challenges of the future, it must find a mechanism to raise up all the 5 million plus businesses in the UK, rather than just leave this as the purview of the few social enterprises or businesses that are really prioritising social value. So, enter the Better Business Act. Our mission is to change UK law to make sure that every single company in the UK, whether big or small, puts balancing people, planet, and profit at the heart of their purpose and the responsibility of their directors. The Better Business Act aims to amend Section 172 of the Companies Act, and this will ensure that company directors are responsible for advancing the interests of their shareholders alongside society and the environment. The objective is to see the 4 principles that I've got here on this slide reflected in an amended Section 172. And in doing so, that the government will establish a new level playing field for all UK businesses. So just to run you very quickly through the principles. The first principle is that the interests of all shareholders are aligned with those of other stakeholders, thereby establishing a new principle of fiduciary duty rather than the outdated one of stakeholder primacy. The second change is to empower directors so that they can exercise their judgment when weighing up and advancing the interests of those various stakeholders. The third is to make this a default change. So currently it's an option, and we believe it cannot be optional to benefit wider stakeholders beyond just shareholders. And finally, following this change, businesses must report in detail on how they balance people, planet, and profit in a strategic report or some similar impact report. For many directors and those companies that Beth was referring to earlier, this change in the law will not materially affect their behaviours or the actions of their companies. But by becoming law, it will ensure that no business in the UK can use short-term profit maximising to justify behaviour that is harmful to society or the environment. I thought I'd just give you some ideas about what this might look like in practice. So this will change directors' duties, in essence, the job description of a director, and thereby change the nature of conversations in the boardroom, allowing for a more holistic approach to the challenges faced by the company's directors. This means freeing up decision makers in business to act in everyone's long-term interests rather than just the interests of their shareholders, and thereby combine traditions of good stewardship and responsibility with new ideas, innovation, in essence, to meet the challenges of those choppy 21st century waters that I was mentioning earlier. A few more examples. Opening up these conversations in boardrooms would potentially mean that headlines like these from Vodafone and John Lewis may no longer stand out as the exception. And these would be the sorts of decisions we see every company making. The BBA may also help to avert another Super League style mistake. For anyone who missed this fleeting idea, the European Super League was a proposal for an elite competition of Europe's best football teams, a proposal that was driven by profit maximization and at the expense of the interests of fans and players alike. At present, directors such as those at the European Super League founder clubs are required under the Companies Act to only have regard to employees, its suppliers, customers, and others. But the priority is to deliver shareholder returns. The directors of the founding clubs of the European Super League are unlikely to have made the decision to push ahead with the concept had they been required to align other stakeholder interests rather than simply have regard to them. As we have seen through these various examples I have given you, the Better Business Act would therefore be a rising tide to raise all boats. For the sake of our societies and the planet, we can't afford to continue with business as usual. And the Companies Act as it currently stands is at best vague and at worst a hiding place for those that want to justify profit maximizing despite the costs to wider society or the planet. By legally requiring directors to operate in a manner that benefits all stakeholders alongside their shareholders, the Better Business Act would be the law catching up with changing business culture and bringing those that are lagging along with it. So why is 2021 the moment to act? Well, it's a unique opportunity for the UK to demonstrate leadership on a global stage. We've just hosted the G7, and as we look forward to COP26, this is an opportune moment, not just to be part of, but to lead the growing trend for the adoption of a new model of corporate governance. With the recognition of the environment as a key stakeholder consideration for all businesses, the Better Business Act provides a solid legal foundation to support the government's plan for a green industrial revolution and the UK's net zero targets. The time is now, given that we have a government that holds a stable majority and therefore is in a position to change the law, and a clear agenda for levelling up and building back better post-COVID, which aligns well with the aims of the Better Business Act. We also know that the UK public is behind this. Our research shows that UK voters and consumers want business to do better. 3/4 of UK public think that business has a responsibility to protect the environment, and the majority favour brands that do good in the world. To achieve this change in the law, we're bringing together a broad and growing coalition of leaders from across all sectors and all regions of the UK to help deliver this new contract between business and society. So we're starting with a coalition and building from there. since our launch at the end of March, so just a couple of months ago, really, the Better Business Act has attracted the support of over 600 businesses, and it's reflective of all regions and all sectors of the UK. We also launched in Parliament, so as you can see, you've got this dual track on my slide here, demonstrating the kind of coalition of business building, but also this sort of policy level support that we're building along the second track. So meeting with MPs following on from our parliamentary launch, and bringing them on board with the concept of making this change law. Our aim is to keep building this momentum through the year, bringing on more and more businesses to take us to 6,000 rather than 600 businesses, and continuing to increase the political support for change. We also, so that ideally when we get to COP26, we're ready to make a very clear and loud message from businesses that now is the time to act, and have the BBA, the Better Business Act, feature in the next Queen's speech. So to summarise, the Better Business Act is a business-led campaign to change the UK law, to make sure every single company in the UK, whether big or small, aligns the interests of their shareholders with those of wider society and the environment. The BBA coalition includes some of the UK's best known brands, as you can see, as well as business representative bodies such as the IOD, and of course, Social Value UK is also here. We need businesses large and small to sign up to support the BBA, so that we can make our message really clear to government, that business is calling for this change and for the sake of our collective future. So if anyone on this call happens to be a business leader, then please sign up today at thebetterbusinessact.org. If you work for a business, make sure you get them to sign up, or if you know anybody in your network who you think should already be backing this, then please do let us know, or send them to our website. And otherwise, yeah, the more that you can spread the word about the BBA, the better. So thank you very much, and I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Hannah. That was great. And now I'll pass you over to our final speaker of the session and our final speaker of Members Exchange, and that is Isabel.
Thank you very much, David. It's been really fascinating, actually, and I'm so glad. I was saying to the panel just before we logged on that I am so glad that I'm last, because I was really looking forward to hearing the things that they've each had to say, and it's been really fascinating to see the link between all of the things that people have shared. I was particularly interested in Joanne talking about not simply being a talking shop and actually getting on with pragmatic action. And that's something that I will share in terms of my story as well. Also interesting to hear Hannah just speak about the Better Business Act and the fact that we really have to get a sense of corporate responsibility that in many ways is mandated. And the Super League was such a brilliant example. You've explained it so well. The newspapers were splashed with the details of what had happened, but you've explained it better than many radio presenters, so that was fantastic. And really interested in Beth talking about the work that she's been engaged in and the move toward a collective sense of consciousness. And that's definitely something that I have recognised in some of the work that I have done. And then Nigel bringing together the concept of public sector, private sector and charitable sector. So I'll just share how I feel I relate to all of those areas. As you know, you can tell from my title in the Zoom link that I'm one of the CEOs of SVUK. Thank you to whoever changed my name, by the way, because I did log on using my son's laptop for the height of efficiency, and somebody changed it for me, so I appreciate that. And I will be leading SVUK alongside the amazing Crispin, who is also on this call. So he is in one of the squares, hopefully on your screen. And I have to say, we've been in role for a couple of weeks now, and it is such a privilege to work alongside somebody who is so inspirational, calm in the midst of a crisis, and a very, very encouraging leader. So I'm so looking forward to working with Crispin and I hope indeed that you will get to know him too in the way that I have. So in terms of me and how I arrived here at this place, my family came to the UK in the 1960s, so we are part of the Windrush generation, and I am officially a second generation immigrant, and so I understand all of the stories relating to Windrush because my family itself experienced many of the difficulties that you've probably seen in the press about proving that you have a right to be in this country. So that was a very interesting thing to go through over the past few months and weeks in terms of the reality of what inequality means and how it actually impacted members of my family. And I grew up in the UK until about the age of 10, when I went back to my other homeland of Trinidad and Tobago, and I went to school there for a few years. And then I returned back to East London, which was my original home. And so I grew up in an area that at that time was very deprived. We didn't have great access to lots of the things that many of the children that I know now do. So, you know, it was kind of, you go to school, you come home, and there's not a lot to do outside of that. So that was my background. You know, I had a Cockney accent when I was growing up, and I fought very hard to become educated because I understood very early on that education was the way that I was going to improve my life. And I then went on to qualify as a barrister. I was one of the first people in my family to go to university. My sister was the other person. And I have spent many, many years being a barrister by profession, and I ended up starting my own barrister's chambers just through a series of circumstances of trying to juggle having 4 young children and maintain a full-time job. And I don't know what made me think it would be easier to be head of my own chambers, but I decided to do that. So that was my past professional life. And from a community service point of view, I became engaged in community service in roughly 2015, when I entered into serving as a school governor and a trustee of educational charities. In fact, it's probably a bit before then, actually, because my political journey is what began in 2015. In 2015, I then entered the political world, and I have every sympathy for Joanne. I understand a lot of what you're going through in terms of the pressures and wanting to get so many things done and all of the things that come with being a politician. I think it's a very unique space in terms of building resilience. There is no other environment that I think builds resilience compared to being a politician. And I rose through the ranks very quickly to become vice president of a major UK political party. And one of the things that I think contributed to becoming, you know, somebody in that position so very quickly was the fact that I was very objective. So I wasn't so engaged in that world that, in fact, I had no interest in politics, to be honest, before I entered it, which was a very strange thing. And I think it was that objectivity that meant that I could look at things in a very cold way. And we've heard over the weeks that people, over the last few days at the Members Exchange, that researchers have talked about the idea of, should you be engaged in an organisation and do the research, or should you have a more objective point of view? And I think listening to that, it made me reflect on my experience within politics, which was being objective just took the heat out of it. It meant that I wasn't so caught up in that world that I couldn't see the wood for the trees. And so what I wanted to speak to you about today is some of the work that I did in politics. And really, the way that I decided to approach things using my office was that I didn't want to be party political. I wanted to work across the political spectrum. But the key thing which interests me about what Nigel has said is that we set up a programme that involved public, private and charitable sectors, as well as thought leaders. And part of the work that I did involved setting up a series of events that were talking about policy, but also leading to practical change. And so we worked in various areas of equality, covering race, covering gender, covering disability. And I'm aware that we don't have a lot of time, so, and I can see David sweating a bit. So I'm not going to go into the detail, but what I wanted to share very briefly are the sort of headlines in terms of the work that I did, which was what really mattered was engaging with people across the spectrum. So I didn't make what I was doing political. I wanted people to feel that they could come from any political party or none and engage in this process. I also wanted to make what I was doing accessible. So if people wanted to engage by attending on a panel or attending as a Zoom member, that was fine. But there were many people who couldn't necessarily log on onto the internet. They might not have had broadband. They might not have been able to attend at certain times because they were working parents. So I had people sending in vlogs of what they felt it was like being disabled in Britain in 2021, which was the subject matter we were discussing. And people then could also send in audios to me if they weren't comfortable appearing on screen, or write to me. And so I got a whole movement together of people who wanted to work together to, yes, have the webinar that I was setting up, but then to take it forward into practical action. And that is still being outworked today. I'm still getting message after message every single day about the work that I've done and how people are joining together to ensure that it continues. So I will stop there, just to say that in parallel with what I have done in my past life, I hope to bring it into SVUK in the sense of being able to connect people together, to share a message, to create a movement, and something that is sustainable, not just, as Joanne has said, a talking shop. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Isabel. Well, that takes us right to the end of our session, and we're just about under time, so that's perfect. Well, the next session and the final session of the day is going to be the closing remarks. So that's going to take place in 15 minutes. After that, there is going to be a quiz hosted by myself and Rosie, who I believe is here as well, where there will be some prizes in terms of donations to charities. So please feel free to join us for that too. But thank you all for attending, and thank you for attending this week. Please post anything from this on social media. We'll be posting some stuff there. And this session, along with every other session, will be available to rewatch. Hopefully tomorrow, maybe by next week, but everything will be there for the rest of the month. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you to our speakers.